Welcome everybody to today's webinar, Skills and Strategies for Tech Talent Growth in 2024. Now we've got a very exciting and hopefully interesting webinar planned today for you all. But before we get started, I've got three very quick things to get through. So first of all, this webinar is being recorded. So if you can't make it to the end of today's session, you'll be receiving a link to the webinar tomorrow in your email. It'll also be on our YouTube channel. Second of all, there will be time for a Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. So if you've got any questions for our panelists, feel free to fire them into our panelists at any time during today's webinar. There's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can type them in there. We'll save some time at the end to get to them. And last but not least, we will be running some polls throughout the webinar today. So we really encourage you to get involved with them and vote in them, because some of our questions we've got planned will be centered around those polls. So your insights and your votes will help us there. So yeah, thank you very much for those quick things there. I will now begin to introduce our panelists. I might start with Locke. Thanks very much for joining us. And can you give us a quick introduction about yourself, please?
Sure. No, thanks. Looking forward to the session. I'm one of the founders of Revello, which is a company that helps US companies find, hire, and then pay and manage the benefits of remote software developers across Latin America. We've got the largest pool of software developers across Latin America, due mostly to our business having subsidiaries that operate across most of the countries in Latin America as well. So for anyone that is looking to tap into nearshore software developers, love to speak more to anybody. Apart from that, as you might be able to tell from the accent, I'm a fellow Australian, but have lived in the Americas for the past 12 to 14 years of my life.
Yep. We should get the Australian part of it out of the way early, just so people aren't confused there. Thanks very much, Locke, for the introduction. Demetrius, can you give us a quick intro about yourself as well, please?
Sure. Absolutely. So Demetrius, Chief Revenue Officer at DevSkiller. I joined the company almost a year ago. The company itself, as everybody knows, is specializing in skills assessment and skills management software. We have a variety of different customers across the financial services, manufacturing, software, and many other industries, helping to implement and maintain the upskilling and reskilling programs. Based in California, out of San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm looking forward to have a great conversation with Locke about his business and how he sees also a couple of these key HR challenges from his perspective. So thank you for joining us.
And thank you both for those introductions. So as I mentioned at the top, we will be having a few polls throughout today's discussion. I'm going to kick us off with our first one, which I'll launch and should be appearing on your screen now. So the question here is, which technology areas will be most crucial for software engineers to master in 2024 to maintain a competitive edge? We have AI and machine learning, blockchain, cloud computing, quantum computing, the Internet of Things, cybersecurity, AR and virtual reality, big data analytics, and other. And as I mentioned, we will be having three polls today. So your responses here will help us to hopefully shape our discussion around that and again, provide some useful tips and insights for you guys there. And only half of you have voted. So if you're only listening in, please drop a vote in, jump over to Zoom and drop a vote. If you're on the live stream, unfortunately, you can't vote. So apologies for that. Okay, I am going to end the poll and share the results on the screens. And no surprises there, with 77% response of the responses, AI and machine learning. But we also had votes for cybersecurity, cloud computing, and big data analytics and data science. So thank you very much for those responses there. And I will get to our first question here, which is here for you, Locke, talking about the emerging technologies. So what emerging technologies will software engineers need to adapt to maintain a competitive edge for 2024 and beyond?
Yeah. There's two separate ways I think about this. I think when I think of really practical stuff that they should be studying on, I mean, the most popular programming languages continue to be the same and grow in popularity, which would be Python and most JavaScript frameworks, things like React and Node, etc. And I think the new thing that has come into software engineering over the past couple of years are these AI tools that help them write code faster. So sometimes they're called co-pilot tools, sometimes they're separate tools, but most companies have seen just a massive uptick in productivity from their software development teams once the developers have learned to use those tools effectively. And so those are becoming par for the course for any software developer. I think when I think beyond 2024 and what the job is going to evolve into, it's always the same. There's problem-solving skills, architecture skills, but the way I like to think of it as non-coders, the way I described it is how to solve a business problem with code. That's a skill that a software engineer has to be working on their whole career, because that at its core is what the best software engineers and VPs of engineering and CTOs can do. And that's something that it would just take a very, very long time for artificial intelligence to be able to replace.
Yep. Thank you. Demetrius, what's your angle on this one?
Yeah, I would completely agree with Locke about the problem-solving skills and how to do the architecture and how to really think uh, about solutions from the 20,000 feet view. I think there are some emerging technologies that are not yet in the mainstream. Of course, artificial intelligence is taking a lot of the spotlight right now, and everybody's trying to figure out what type of impact it's going to have, not only for us as employees, but also as individuals in a private life, right? So there's still a lot of existential questions around that. But artificial intelligence, blockchain, a lot of these you listed also in the survey. But also quantum computing, right? That's something that is emerging as a new scientific and to a degree commercialized area by some companies. Some people say that's the next big thing after artificial intelligence. So I think of preparing for these new waves of things, it's important. But I would highlight the one thing that we probably don't talk enough about. It's the adaptability. And as humans, we have a natural inclination into something that is not pushing us towards something new. We like to have a stability, especially when you enter in the working environment, and it's much harder to challenge employees and the status quo around the core skills because they feel good about this, they work hard to gain them. But the reality is telling us something else, right? The two lines of the digital transformation and the digitalization of our working environment, it requires more and more skills around the complex technologies, and the adaptability process, it's going up, but the gap between these two is just growing. So I think we need the new ways of thinking about how to adapt to the new technologies and how to remain ahead of the curve, so that we don't have a situation like with the artificial intelligence. We need 250,000 data scientists and engineers in order to build these complex models. That's going to take a time before we can build these skills in organizations and be able to supply them on the market. So,
yeah. I think two takeaways there as well. Is talking about the pace of development as well. If you look at how quickly AI is moving, the speed at which it's moving in terms of how quickly this technology is developing as well, creating a greater gap in the market as well. It's very interesting, and it's interesting you point that out because we will be discussing a little bit later today about skill gaps and some approaches for that, both from the talent acquisition side and the internal mobility side as well. So thank you both for those responses there. Block, I'll bring it back to you. And this time we're going to talk, this question, we're talking a little bit about challenges. So what are some key challenges that companies face in attracting and retaining top tech talent, working specifically based off of your experience in the LATAM region for companies in the United States?
I I think Dimitris made a great point in adaptability. Things just change so quickly in the tech industry that all of us need to adapt to new realities. I think the classic mistake I see is one where people haven't yet adapted to the reality that remote work with software engineers is so much more mainstream. And where that normally comes through is they say they want to get similar quality software engineers. If you're in, say, New York City, you want a similar quality software engineer, you want to hire from Brazil because it's in the same time zone, and you think that you should pay 20% of the salary of what you pay in New York City. Before COVID, when remote work was rare, that was possible. Now it's not possible anymore. And if it is possible, it's a false economy, because once that software engineer has proven himself working in the American market, he'll get poached or he'll move to another job that pays 70 or 80% of the American rates. So I think that's the biggest challenge I see is American companies not yet used to the fact that when they're hiring the very best software engineers across Latin America, they're actually competing with other American companies to hire those software engineers. So you need to make sure you are paying at least a market rate, a competitive rate. It's often cheaper, still 20, 30% cheaper than the United States, but it's not the same discount that you used to get before remote work was the norm.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any tips about retention? Because obviously, like to start with, you're talking about getting them in the first place with the competitive salary, but any tips there on retention?
Look, I think that's also the great thing that I've actually seen companies that do this well have adapted really well. In the past, you used to hire a remote worker and they used to be a second-class citizen. Now, I'm really impressed with the amount of companies that their whole team's remote, so they treat everybody the same. And what that means is they help all remote engineers build a real career at their company. That means help them develop their skills, give them interesting work. Does their manager have one-on-ones? Do they map out the skills that they need to cover off to get a promotion? Is that clearly communicated to them? And so that kind of core HR work to make sure that even remote employees have a fulfilling career at your company, that I see more and more companies taking that seriously, which is a great win for decreasing churn of candidates.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that there. I will have a look. Sorry, we thought we had a Bob that's coming up next. So I wanted to, bring it back to you, Dimitris, talking about here skill gaps. You mentioned in your first response about skill gaps, but hopefully for the audience, if we're talking about tools, so in terms of what essential tools for talent acquisition and HR professionals are out there to effectively bridge skill gaps within their organizations.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, a lot of people think about this topic through some sort of magical software that comes in and is solving all your problems, right? Of course, the software is a big component that helps you with that, but I don't think that's where it starts. It starts with the culture. Each company has to realize how important it is for them to acquire new skills and maintain skills. And this is not just because the employees want that. I think it's just a matter of remaining competitive on the market. While you are competitive, you're very likely going to get the key talents, through your pipeline of candidates, right? So if you foster the right culture, I think you are on this trajectory to implement some software that helps you to amplify these good practices and behavior that you can see and observe in the company. So I think the culture of innovation is number one. The second is the collaboration. Locke mentioned about like how you work internationally, between the Brazil, maybe other locations in Latin America and US, right? That there are some differences and slightly different practices, but you need to be open to collaborate and treat people the same way as they would be part of your organization. And you need to be inclusive in terms of the partners and research institutions. So you got to go beyond what the typical business ecosystem would look like, right? Then if you look at this from the other components perspective, you start with something that is very basic. You need to know what type of skills you have, right? The inventory of these skills you need to be documented. It has to be done in a probably methodical and very structured way, so that you can really have some degree of accuracy, and especially when you're starting to measure the team and the progress, right? The second is you need to have a career pathing. Sorry, career pathing, and I think this is giving the ability to see where people are, and also where they're going. If you don't know where you're going, you're probably going nowhere. So employees have these paths and the plans put in place. Um, it, this helps you to also build some succession plans, and they know what's the next thing that is coming their way. And I think that's probably where we can learn a lot from the consulting businesses. I'm not saying every company should be like consulting business, but in consulting, you have a quite predictable path, in terms of what are the options, or where you can choose to be in the next couple of steps, right? So, I think the other one is just companies very often struggle with regular performance review. These programs are treated like a template, not really as a source of information, and that can convert into something that is called as a program. It's called as something that helps individuals to get better, right? And so, last two things I'll mention is the data analytics, very often forgotten. A lot of programs fail in the organization and squander resources because they are not prescriptive enough, and also don't offer enough, I would say, insight at the aggregate level or different parts of the organization, reflecting the scale of the problem. And just they're anecdotal, right? Look at the Coursera published the result, like 95% of people that are starting their courses, they just don't finish them. That's a staggering number. So being prescriptive is important. And the last one is you have to have a system that helps you to manage all of that. You're bringing all these things with the data produced by different teams involved in the processes on the one platform, where you have a secret sauce, and that is helping you to manage this effectively, right? You can see, where you have gaps in organizations and teams, so that the teams can actually get better at planning for the products and services that they need to deliver. But also you have a very clear navigation process from the L&D, HR, but also managers and executives towards the individuals, how they can acquire the skills, new skills, improve the versatility of their deliverables, but also know where they're going from the career perspective.
Okay. Let's move forward. Thanks very much for that, Demetrius. I'm going to launch the second poll on your screen, which should be appearing right now. We're going to talk a little bit more about skill gaps, but also some strategies to overcome them. So the question here is, which strategy do you find most effective to close skill gaps present within your organization? We've got comprehensive in-house training, partnering with educational institutions, encouraging and sponsoring certifications, implementing mentorship and coaching programs, leveraging online platforms, fostering a culture of continuous learning, hiring external consultants, or utilizing cross-functional projects for hands-on learning experiences. Obviously, if there's something that's not there that you find most effective, you can also just drop a vote for other as well. And this will sort of shape up the next few questions we've got here about closing skill gaps and best practices and trends for tech talent development. And yeah, we'll get to them shortly. And I can see quite a few of you have voted, but still a few more of you to go. So please drop in a vote. Can already see a pretty mixed bag of results, which is good to see. We can hopefully touch on all of them. Give it a few more moments. And I'll end that poll right now and share the results, which should be appearing on your screen right now. And we have the top vote getter with 36% fostering a culture of continuous learning and self-improvement. But we had votes pretty much across the board, utilizing cross-functional projects. We've also got 14% encouraging and sponsoring certification, external training, and comprehensive in-house training and development programs, with some other votes scattered across there as well. So thank you once again for getting involved with the votes there, everyone. And this next question is actually going to be for both of you, but I want you to sort of take it from a different angle, both of you. But I'll start with you, Locke, talking about how HR and talent acquisition teams can collaborate to effectively close organizational skill gaps. I think it's probably best from your perspective to touch on the talent acquisition side, but obviously take it wherever you like, and Demetrius can follow up.
Yeah, for sure. Look, how I recommend people do it is in a very structured way. I think a common mistake we've definitely made at Revello in the past, and a lot of companies do, is they have this concept of, we want to hire the best people, and they go out and they hire really smart people generally for the role. And it's actually much more effective if you're just very structured in mapping out, okay, what are the gaps we have? What are the specific skills that we're trying to fill with this hire? And then designing an interview process around those skills. So make sure you have questions or case studies that test those skills, and that you've mapped out what's a strong response and what's a weak response. If not, it's just very, very easy to get swayed by some super smart, and then you end up never filling that organizational skills gap that you were hiring for. Mistake, and I think it's probably chronic across all organizations.
I think if you could just repeat that last point, Locke, because we just lost you momentarily there.
I just said, I know we've definitely made that mistake at Revello in the past, and I think it's probably a chronic problem across most organizations in the world. Yeah.
And what about you, Demetrius, from a HR perspective? What are some ways for better collaboration between talent acquisition teams and HR?
Yeah, I think the biggest enemy in this space is the silo approach, right? Like you have, each of the teams is doing their own thing because they are responsible for a part of the process, right? And then somebody's just doing that, and there's this, and they never really talk. And I think the best way to bring them together is just to align the goals and objectives at the aggregate level, so that it cascades down and they have something in common. And then when you do this, you also focus on the synergies, right? Like you don't look at each very nitty-gritty item and not the operational level, but you say, hey, what really matters to the organization? Like what really is going to make us better in our product development, and what's going to get us better in our service delivery, right? And so on and so on. And I think once you have that, it's much easier, right? The second is to communicate. And I often see that the HR is communicating very well around issues that are compliance related, but rarely are getting involved in a communication about how they impact the business, how they really help to wrap the business and deliver on specific impact around the things that help company to make money and grow, right? So having that in place, I think, can help, but also between each other, right? What you do, what you don't do, and how these things really align with these objectives. The other one is the shared data and insights, and I think I'm very biased towards the analytics. Once you have insights, it's helping to understand what are the key areas, what you should prioritize, right? You will never have enough resources to cover all the areas, all programs, right? But there you can definitely have a short list of things that analytics can help you to do, and then going back to my earlier point, reflect this with the objectives and other things you're gonna track, right? So then is leverage the technology. We talked about the adaptability, and I think adapting to the new technology requires more technology that can help you to get there. If you connect this with the analytics, that's quite powerful, because you're reducing the noise and the waste in the process. There are millions of dollars that the companies are spending, and they don't even know what they're getting back. And when they really do these analysis, they realize, okay, we spent all that money, but we really didn't get anything out of it, right? Why? Well, if your programs were based on the anecdotal stories or half-baked numbers, yeah, that's a problem, right? So I think the last one that we mentioned about the culture and monitoring the progress, having a place where you can go and monitor these initiatives, how far through you are, how far off of the goals and objectives you are, and how much changes you need to implement in order to be on track. That's probably something that will help the organizations to correct if something goes wrong, right? That's sounds like obvious, but a lot of companies simply don't do this. They're using spreadsheets, they're using docs, and they think that's sufficient. It's not.
I just wanted to build on top of one of those points that I thought was really good, that the importance of in any learning and development program of having the numbers and the analytics and being sure that what you're working on actually has a positive impact on the organization. It's really essential. One of the problems that I think we all fall into is everybody likes learning and development in general, but sooner or later, if you don't have the numbers and the proof to show why you're actually doing that initiative, eventually some CFO comes along and isn't happy with the spend and makes you cut people, and it really sucks because there are always great people in those departments. So the importance of that analytics piece in being really deliberate in where you spend your time and your resources, it just makes everybody's working life much better if you do that work.
Yeah, I agree. Like at some point, it's a budgetary conversation, right? Like somebody as a CFO can understand. Okay, I know you're telling me you need this, but show me that it's going to work. Right?
Where's the proof?
That's a good point. And I think for that same reason, you need to do the monitoring and give people some transparent access so they can see, and having frequent iteration so that you can correct things, without waiting another 6 months or something like that, right?
Yep. All right, thank you very much. So we've got the next sort of chapter of the discussion here is going to be talking a little bit more about tech talent development. And this first question's back to you, Locke, talking about some emerging best practices and trends in tech talent development, and how organizations can future-proof their workforce using some of these strategies.
Yeah. Look, in terms of for software developers, in terms of talent development, we've referred to it beforehand, and I think everyone listening knows this already because it was in the poll results. That culture of continuous innovation and improvement, it's really the only thing you'll ever be able to do, or the most important thing you'll ever be able to do to ensure that your software engineers stay up to date. As Dimitra said earlier on, it would be really nice for everybody if we could just stay doing what we're good at. But if you work in technology, it's just not reality. Every 2 to 3 years, someone from Silicon Valley comes along with a new trick that changes the game for everybody. And so you just really need to have that culture of people that are happy to adapt, that find it interesting and good to adapt. That's the one thing that I think everybody should focus on. And I think that'll be true for the next 50 years.
Yep. Demetrius, you want to add anything on this point?
I think the key element I would call out is that a lot of companies maybe realize that they have to do this, but they just simply don't know how, right? It's like, okay, we know that we want to colonize Mars, but how to do this, right? And that's where the whole fun starts. I'm not saying we have to do that. We have to go that far, but I think these programs have to have some element of overcoming the key obstacle, which is fear.
Mm.
And that's really hard because you are put between the kind of company's objectives and employees' fear of being assessed on based on failures, right? And if they fail not learning enough quickly enough and not delivering on this new thing fast enough, they're going to default to something that they know the best, right? And that's not necessarily what the company wants. So finding the right balance between these two elements, these two trends, and kind of conflicting um, intentions, it's probably a critical piece in order to move forward from when a lot of these organizations are.
Yep. I mean, it's interesting. I think I'll stay with you, Dimitri, because we got a question here talking about the learning and development angle, which was briefly mentioned there, but sort of digging a little bit deeper into the actual strategies. The question here is, how can learning development professionals leverage employee development opportunities like personalized learning pathways, mentorship programs to build their internal pipeline and develop their expertise of their software engineers?
Yeah, I think it starts with what I just said about the fear, and I think overcoming that, you need a couple of things that you need to put in place so that employees are starting to feel a little bit more of hand-holding process that is accepted by the company, it's supported by the company, and the leadership is on board with that, right? Because that means that direct manager won't try to just go against these rules, right? So I think when the company has a top-down requirements around the personalized learning paths, that is helping to stay on track with things that actually are more definitive, right? It's not anymore to the direct manager to say in the one meeting, okay, you should focus on this skill versus another skill, and then somebody's confused. Look, it takes weeks to acquire that. Why we're changing these objectives, right? Well, once this is in the system, and because that's the requirement, I think it's helping employees to have a little bit of security that's more stable, and that's what they should be focusing on, right? The other one is, and full transparency, of course, I'm biased a little bit towards this point, but it's upskilling and reskilling programs, but not in the sense that, someone is throwing a bunch of LMS videos at engineer and expecting this individual to review them all and suddenly will be enlightened and do something about this. It's not going to work, right? Let's be honest. That requires a little bit more planning and planning ahead. I like to think about this like a multi-year strategic objectives, right? From the technology perspective. Like if every industry has their own next thing, telecom has a 5G, right? Energy has a solar energy and the wind renewables, whatever you call it, right? Every single industry has their own
Automotive,
skill
electronic
to acquire.
vehicles. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So if the organization is setting this goal with a certain skills mix behind this, I think it's much easier to tie this with a career path of the specific individuals and manage the entire organization moving towards this direction. That is also extra security for the employees. Okay, if that's the goal, we can't just turn this next day, into something else because it's affecting thousands of people very often, right? So having this done in the proper way without just doing LMS, that's helpful. I think the third one, very often considered to be a waste of time, I've heard that so many times, is the mentorship and coaching programs. I personally found these absolutely critical to me, right? Like my career working in a big company, even a small company, and that was extremely helpful. It helped to adopt the new reality, challenge, calibrate things properly so that it became more effective. And I think feeling supported by some senior individuals in the organization, even though they don't necessarily cross their path every single day with you. I think it's just helping to collaborate more effectively. It's reducing the feeling that there is a little of hierarchy in the decision-making process. So that helps with the collaboration and also exchange of experiences, right? If I'm in finance and my mentor is somewhere, I'm in FP&A and I'm working with someone who's my mentor in tax. Well, it's not necessarily my expertise, but I'm learning something about that, right? Are you learning about how this part of the finance really operates? And that is somehow enriching you, right? Maybe not on at the first meeting, but eventually you will learn something. So the last thing I'll mention is just the on-the-job training, and that goes back to my fear as well. A lot of people just don't want to get a new job because they will think, you know what, there's going to be a lot of work to adjust, and my rating will go down. You know, maybe that's not necessarily a good thing, and I can lose the job. So why would I change? I think the companies need to create the program behind this that actually are promoting people that are changing jobs after a certain period of time. I wouldn't recommend to change job maybe more often than a year, 2 years, especially when you're a senior. You shouldn't change more than 2 years, every 2 years. But I think uh, overcoming that fear of the new thing it requires a little bit push and extra help. So I would highly recommend to encourage an organization to move employees around between the different projects and acquire new skills for the new job.
Yep. Yep. Some very interesting points there. Thanks, Demetrius. Look, do you want to add anything on top there, or should we move ahead?
No. Yeah, I think that was really well put.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. So, awesome. Yeah. So we'll move ahead here, and Demetrius touched on it very very briefly at the beginning there, but talking about the role of leadership in tech talent development. So, how can leadership empower talent to join their teams to stay ahead with the emergence of new skills?
Are you talking there about how do they convince the talent to join, or how do they convince their current team of the importance of learning and development and learning new skills?
To join to
Yeah,
in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean to join. I think before any process which you run where you're trying to hire, you need to have a good hard look at what you can offer and be really clear on what are your strong suits and what are the points that you're not as strong on. And then you need to sell the points that are good about your organization. There's no job in the world which is super inspiring, interesting work with great work-life balance and a salary. That's not out there. And if it is, tell me, because I'll close down the company we're running and see if we can find it.
And move on.
Yeah, but when you look at your organization, there is always strong points. Some companies have a great group of people to work with. Some companies pay really well. Other companies don't pay as well, but the work's really fascinating and you learn a lot. So be really clear on what that is, and then present that really clearly on the job posting, in the interview process. Your job is not to convince people who don't want to work at your company to come and work at your company. Your job is to show them what are the good things about working at your company, and the candidates who want those things will join and have a productive career with you. So just be really clear on those points, sell them on every front you can, and the right candidates will end up applying to your job and doing well in your interview process.
I think this is excellent. This is excellent point about being clear what type of culture your company is representing. What are you looking for? What are you expecting from employees? It's rare these days. I'll be honest with you. I mean, many companies are trying to convince the key talent that it's going to fit them, and then somebody's coming on board and can deliver 100% of what they can, right? Normally, what the capacity is.
Not what I signed up for.
Because there's such a disillusionment, right, about what they were sold to. And this goes back into the honesty and of the leadership and clear message they want to put out, right? What type of company they are. I agree with this. Very good point.
Yeah, and I mean that point on choosing your culture and being clear on that is essential. I think for a long time, a lot of people in our space would try and emulate Google and say, we work on it, we're competing with. The reality is we do not have access to the same volume of data that Google has and the same resources that Google have. We don't pay as much as Google. We can't give you as many perks as Google. We can't give you access to the largest search engine in the world. So you can't compete on those fronts. But there are other things that candidates value that you can compete on. Be clear on them and find parts of the world to recruit from that are different and where those value propositions sell well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very good.
Yep. I wanted maybe Demetrius, if you wanted to sort of elaborate it on on the flip side. So once the existing talent, once they're on board, how leadership can be involved and create this culture for developing the talent once it's actually they've been hired.
Yeah, I think you have to, first of all, you have to show that you care. To Locke's point about the recruiting process, people getting sold, on some idea, there's a high maintenance and, hypercare, and suddenly, boom, nothing happens, right? And you're on your own.
Yeah.
Without the guidance, without the help, your manager maybe is just not really spending enough time with you. I'm busy, 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 and there's no push from the HR or levels above to behave differently, right? And I think there's a lot of research that tells you that onboarding process is extremely important. But the onboarding is really never ending with the date when you are off the program, right? And suddenly these meetings are not coming in. That doesn't mean that you are just not onboarding. It continues. It's almost like with a sales rep that is ramping, right, on the quota and months ahead, with the expectations that they're going to get to be, I don't know, 70-80% of the quota for a specific period. And the same is with everybody else, right? So I think the management has to care enough about the newcomers. And the second thing is you have to be a human. So I think if you show the care, but on one hand, on the other hand, you just want to help, and you also want to introduce yourself as a leader to the new person that is coming. And I understand thousands of people, impossible. But if you are 150 employees company and you hire just 3 individuals, show up in one of the meetings and say hello, that's probably not a bad idea, right? That's also very important that you're making this collaboration element more personalized. And I think from the skills perspective, you need to have a place where you're showing what the next objectives are for the individuals. You don't want to squander somebody's enthusiasm to join the organization and keep, showing that they can deliver. So having a clear objectives and putting the kind of overall scheme for the team and the organization helps them to feel that they are part of something. They are not detached. And I think this integrates them faster in the existing structure than just being on their own with almost very little non-guidance, right? I mentioned about mentoring and coaching. So having a mentor from the day one would definitely help. Some companies call this buddy. I'll probably go for mentor because it helps to build the connections within the organization and accelerates the collaboration process. So yeah, I think these are the things that definitely leadership can do and could show a lot of good faith into the newcomers that are coming on board and continue the growth from day one without waiting for the moment when they're going to raise their hand and say, look, I don't like this. And 3 months later, they're gone, right?
Yeah,
Because that's how it ends.
Yep. Yeah, thank you very much for both of you for tackling that question there. I wanted to remind everyone, if you have any questions for our panelists, you can fire them into our Q&A box. If for whatever reason you couldn't think of something now and it comes to you later, you can also send that in to us by email. We'll be happy to answer any questions you have. If I am not mistaken, we were coming up to our third and final poll. So I'm going to launch this, and this will shape up our final question for today's webinar. And this one's looking at outlook. So the question here is, how do you envision the future of tech talent development in your organization over the next 5 years? We've got a bunch of responses here again: increased investment in AI and automation, increased emphasis on soft skills and interdisciplinary learning, greater resilience on remote and virtual learning environments, expansion of peer-to-peer learning, more personalized learning paths, enhanced partnerships with tech companies and educational institutions, shifts towards micro-credentials and skill-specific certifications, and other. We've obviously covered a few of these different points here today. But maybe some of these are already existing in your organization, or something that you think will be coming in the near future. And then we'll finish up with our final question here. We'll look about the emerging trends. So few of you left to vote again, so I'll leave that up on the screen just for a few more seconds. We're almost at a minute. I think everyone has voted, so I'll end the poll and share the results. And we have, with 38% of you, increased investment in AI and automation, but we also had 25% both for increased emphasis on soft skills and more personalized learning paths as well, had 25%, but we also had votes for greater reliance on remote and virtual learning platforms as well. So thank you very much for voting for that poll and with the other two polls throughout today's discussion. And I'll finish with this final question. If there is no Q&A, we'll finish it here, but if something comes and you want to fire it in, please do so. I'll actually ask this to both of you, but I'll start with you, Demetrius. We'll stay with you talking about emerging trends over the next 3 to 5 years. So the question here is, what emerging trends do you foresee in the tech talent landscape over the next 3 to 5 years? And what tips do you have for organizations to best position themselves to attract the right skills for the future?
Yeah, I think the main thing we discuss here, so I won't just go extensively on this, is the reskilling, upskilling, and acquisition of new skills. It's almost inevitable in most of the organizations for most of the functions. It's not only technical. I think technical is impacted in the first place because it's such a fundamental change in the way people work and in tech, but it's going to impact every single industry. Let's be cognizant of that fact, and that's going to continue. And therefore, I think the temporary trend will somehow start spreading into other industries, and I think the necessity to reskill and upskilling, change the job requirement will emerge. So investing in new skills in that space will be a critical thing for organizations to keep the key resources in and thrive. The second, and I think I'm going to follow with the order of the answers that you got in the poll, is the importance of the soft skills. And we often talk about the tech skills or technical skills because they are, it's easy to identify them and probably measure as well, right? But the focus, but the soft skills are the second the most important thing on my list. And things like emotional intelligence, communication, problem solving that Locke mentioned is absolutely critical, but also leadership. We still are suffering from the false leadership model. I'm calling this from 90s and 80s. Maybe somebody is a tough boss and like is just ruling and deciding about everything. I mean, I think that nonsense has to end at some point. I think the true leadership has to emerge as a required skill. There's a lot of stuff out there, writers about that, so I encourage people to read more. The next one, which is maybe considered to be typical HR stuff, but I think it impacts a lot of processes, is diversity and inclusion. I think we have a deficit in terms of balancing out the resources from the multiple backgrounds, and that has a multiple different sources, right? And the reasons. But I'm a true believer that the diversity is sparking collaboration. And when you have a collaboration, you very likely have a creativity, and creativity is pushing people to acquire new skills. And I think that's the component and the one ingredient that we should be cognizant, but also care about as leaders, bringing more diversified workforce to our environment. And that includes not only within the one country, it includes internationally. I think Locke is a specialist in that space, bringing the international workforce into United States and ensuring that there's a match, right? So that's going to be an important element. And talent attraction and retention will continue to be a key issue as there is a growth in the complexity of different technologies. There will be a scarce resource pool for the roles that have a high demand, and we've seen this already before the AI revolution. The machine learning was already having a deficit. IoT, blockchain,
DevOps.
even cloud. There's so
Yeah.
many companies that haven't moved to cloud solutions, right? That was behind. So I think attracting the key talent will become even more important. So, and the last one is what also Locke mentioned is I agree with that. It's a remote work. As the industries realize that the digitalization is allowing them to work almost from anywhere, and you have at the same time a trend where you have a scarcity of resources, you're going to look for them everywhere, right? And if you can get the better price, you're going to go that route, right? Of course, there's a risk calculation behind, but that will continue to be one of the key elements in terms of the hiring and bringing the right workforce to the organization. So yeah, these are the things that will call out.
Thank you. Locke, do you want to sign us off with your thoughts here?
Yeah. Look, I think that last one is the one that I see every day. If you are restricting yourself to hiring now in your own city or your own country, it means you are restricting the talent pool that you have access to for no apparent reason. With companies like Revello now, it's possible to hire in Mexico, in Colombia, in Brazil, just as easily as you would hire in your home state. There's no extra admin, there's no extra cost. They'll help you understand the best way to recruit. And so it's not even more time intensive. And doing that, you can get very, very, very top 1% engineers for about 70% the cost that you would across the United States. So that's something that today more than 50% of companies are doing. So if you're not doing that, you're giving yourself a disadvantage versus your competitors. I think the second thing is, you mentioned in your poll, the role of artificial intelligence. If we think of the recruiting pipeline, once upon a time, we had to look at every CV individually. And then a number of years ago, algorithms got good enough to show you the best matching CV out of that group. Then people added on video interviewing tools and things like that. Revello itself has used artificial intelligence now to take a few more steps down that funnel. So the start of most interview processes, there's a 30-minute technical conversation to work out whether the software engineer technically is around about a good match for the company before they speak to, say, a senior software engineer. There are free tools. Revello creates free tools that you can now use artificial intelligence to do that without using up time of your software engineering teams. Has a much higher, the candidates like it, the internal teams like it. So artificial intelligence will continue to facilitate talent teams in taking out the work that they don't enjoy and allowing them to focus on the really value-add work, like finding the right cultural fit and finding those problem-solving skills that they'll have to do with your technical team. So I think those are the two fronts: remote work and then leveraging the tools that are out there in artificial intelligence are going to be great changes for the talent economy.
Yep. Well said. And thank you. Thank you very much, both of you, for those final responses. I can see that there weren't any questions that came into the Q&A, so I think we can end here. I wanted to just say a big thanks to everybody for joining in today, and to Locke and Demetrius for your insights. We will be sharing, as I mentioned at the beginning, a recording to this webinar. We'll also include links, obviously from DevSkill and Revelo, if you want to learn a little bit more about both of our tools. But otherwise, thank you once again. Thank you, Locke, and thank you, Demetrius, and thank you, everyone, and see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Locke.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.